The medical bay beneath the crucible smelled like three things Ethan Vale had learned to ignore. Antiseptic that was 2 generations out of date. The metallic tang of blood that never quite washed out of the floor drains. And the particular staleness of recycled air that had passed through too many lungs in too small a space. He'd been working on Outpost Kessler for 8 months now. Long enough that his hands no longer shook when they brought in fighters with bones showing through skin. Short enough that he still sometimes woke up surprised to find himself in a place where human suffering was scheduled entertainment. Tonight's crowd had been particularly enthusiastic. Ethan could hear their roars, even through the reinforced floor panels, a sound like thunder that never quite broke into rain. He was restocking his instrument tray, arranging high-stick gel packs in neat rows because organization was one of the few things he could still control when the doors hissed open and 2 arena guards dragged someone in. Not someone, her. Ethan had seen her fight before, though watching was never quite the right word. You didn't watch her the way you watched other fighters. You witnessed her the way you'd witness a storm or a solar flare, something beautiful and terrible that operated on principles beyond simple human violence. She was tall, easily matching Ethan's height, with skin the deep blue-purple of Earth's sky at twilight. Her hair fell past her shoulders in waves of gold, so bright it looked metallic under the harsh fluorescent lights. But it was her ears that marked her as definitely not human, sweeping back from her temples in elegant points that would have looked absurd on anyone else. But on her seemed absolutely right, like evolution had been working toward that specific design. They dropped her onto his examination table with less care than Ethan used for his medical waste. She didn't make a sound, though he could see the way her jaw tightened, muscles jumping beneath that remarkable skin. Around her neck, the shock collar blinked its steady red heartbeat, the universal symbol that the person wearing it was property rather than people. Dislocated shoulder, one guard grunted. Maybe cracked ribs. She's got another fight in 3 days, so fix her. Of course she does, Ethan muttered, pulling on fresh gloves. Because recovery time is for people with health insurance and basic human rights. Silly me for thinking otherwise. The guards left without acknowledging his sarcasm. They never did. Ethan had learned that being the medic who patched up arena slaves gave him roughly the same social status as the mop in the corner, except the mop probably got more respect because it didn't talk back. He turned to his patient, who was watching him with eyes the color of amber, or maybe honey held up to sunlight. They were calculating eyes, the kind that saw 6 moves ahead in whatever game she was playing. She'd been in the crucible for weeks now, undefeated, but increasingly damaged like a blade being sharpened down to nothing. Right, Ethan said, pulling his scanner from its charging dock. Let's see what we're working with. I'm going to need you too. Do what you must, she said. Her voice was rough, probably from screaming, though Ethan had never heard her make a sound during her fights. She spoke Galactic Standard with an accent he couldn't place, each word precisely shaped. No anesthetic. That's a terrible idea, Ethan said automatically, running the scanner over her torso. The holographic display flickered to life, showing him exactly how terrible an idea it was. 3 cracked ribs, 1 badly. The dislocated shoulder, deep tissue bruising that would hurt for weeks. A gash along her rib cage that needed sealing. I've got neural blockers that all. No, not angry, just absolute. I need to stay conscious. Ethan had heard that before, from fighters who'd been drugged and robbed, or worse. Trust was expensive on Kessler, and anesthetic required trust. He sighed and pulled out his instruments. Okay, but I'm going to ramble nervously while I work. Fair warning. It's either that or I put on music and the station's entertainment system only has 2 albums, something called Smooth Void Jazz, and what I'm pretty sure is just 40 minutes of cargo bay machinery. Something might have been amusement flickered across her face. There and gone, like a meteor. She sat perfectly still while Ethan cleaned the gash, her breathing controlled despite what had to be considerable pain. The wound was deep but clean, the kind you got from a blade rather than claws or impact. Someone in tonight's fight had been armed. The previous medic, she said suddenly. What happened to them? Honestly, I have no idea. I showed up 8 months ago and the job was vacant. I like to imagine they won a lottery and retired to somewhere with actual sunlight. But statistically, they probably just developed a substance abuse problem and got fired. Ethan threaded the dermal weaver, watching the flesh knit itself back together in the instrument's wake. I'm aiming for option 1 myself, minus the lottery part. My retirement plan is mostly don't die, with some vague gestures towards save enough credits to get off the station. And yet you are here. She was watching his hands now, the way they moved with the confidence of long practice in this place, doing this work. Yeah, well, Ethan kept his tone light. Turns out medical ethics and corporate pharmaceutical trials don't mix well. Who knew whistleblowing would be bad for job security? Anyway, I'm going to need to reset that shoulder now. This is going to hurt. Like, I understand pain. She did. Ethan had reset dozens of dislocations, and most people screamed, thrashed, needed restraints. She locked eyes with him, her amber gaze steady and fierce. And when he pulled and rotated with the precise force needed to pop the joint back into place, she only exhaled hard through her nose, a sound almost like a controlled explosion. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her hands gripping the edges of the table were white-knuckled, but she didn't scream. Right, Ethan said, hearing his voice shake slightly. He steadied it. So that's the worst part done. The ribs are going to heal on their own, but I can inject some OIO accelerant that'll speed things up. It'll still hurt, but you'll be fighting ready faster. Unfortunately, fighting ready appears to be the goal here, rather than say actually healthy. He was babbling now, filling the space with words while he worked, because silence felt too heavy. He wrapped her ribs, applied dermal patches to the smaller contusions, cleaned blood from her hair with hands that were as gentle as he could make them. She sat through all of it with that same rigid dignity, as if suffering were a discipline she'd mastered. Ethan was applying the last bandage when she leaned close enough that he could feel her breath against his ear. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper, hoarse and desperate in a way that cut through all his professional detachment. Help me escape, please. I cannot die here. Time seemed to crystallize around those words. Ethan's hands froze on the bandage. His brain screamed at him about security cameras, about shock collars programmed to kill at 50 km from the arena perimeter, about the very long list of reasons why this was impossible. But he looked into her eyes and saw something that reminded him why he'd become a doctor in the first place. Back before corporate corruption and arena medicine, when he'd actually believed he could help people. Okay, he heard himself say the word, emerging before his sense of self-preservation could stop it. Okay. Ethan's quarters were exactly 4 meters by 3 meters, which he knew because he'd paced them approximately 8,000 times during his months on Kessler. Right now, crammed into the storage locker beneath his bunk was a blue-kinned warrior woman with pointed ears, who just murdered 2 arena guards with her bare hands, despite having 3 cracked ribs and a recently dislocated shoulder. The guards' bodies were currently decorating the medical bay floor in a way that would definitely void Ethan's security deposit. So, Ethan said, staring at his wall-mounted data pad, where a station-wide alert was flashing red. This is going significantly worse than planned. You had a plan. Her voice drifted up from the locker, muffled by what sounded like his entire collection of stolen medical supplies. I mean, plan is generous. I had a concept, a notion, really. The notion was disable shock collar, sneak you to docking bay, find transport off station. Try not to die. Ethan pulled his emergency pack from under his sink, the one he'd kept ready since his second week on Kessler, when he'd realized that places like this required exit strategies. The dying part is looking increasingly likely. The locker creaked open and she emerged, having to fold herself nearly in half to fit through the opening. She'd stripped off her arena fight suit and was now wearing Ethan's spare maintenance coveralls, which were simultaneously too short in the legs and too loose everywhere else. Her golden hair was tucked under a worker's cap that did absolutely nothing to disguise her. "The collar," she said, touching her neck where the device had been. "How did you remove it?" "Medical override code." Ethan was throwing things into his pack with the systematic panic of someone who'd had to run before. Clothes, credits, his falsified ID chip, the small cylinder of his mother's ashes he'd been carrying for 3 years. Turns out shock collars have a safety feature in case someone needs emergency surgery. Some benevolent bureaucrat decided that slaves should be allowed to survive medical procedures. Really warms your heart about galactic civilization. You are talking very quickly. It's how I process mortal terror. Some people scream. I provide running commentary. It's a gift. Ethan sealed his pack and looked at her properly. Even in coveralls that didn't fit, even with her face still showing the bruises from tonight's fight, she looked like someone who could kill him in approximately 14 different ways. "Listen, I need to know something before we do this. What's your name? Your real name. Not whatever the arena called you." She hesitated, and Ethan could see her calculating whether that information would give him power over her. Finally, she said, "Liz, you may call me Liz." "Right. Liz? I'm Ethan, which you probably figured out from me introducing myself 6 times in the medical bay." While I was panicking, he pulled up a schematic of the station on his data pad. "We're here in the medical staff quarters. Docking Bay 5 is here on the opposite side of the station, through approximately 40 security checkpoints, and past several thousand people who would happily collect the bounty that's probably already on your head. Let's study the schematic with the intensity of someone reading a battle map. The maintenance conduits are filled with superheated coolant, toxic atmosphere, and my personal favorite, random explosive decompression events." Ethan zoomed in on a section. "But yes, they're also our best option. See, this is what my life has become. The good plan involves probable death by coolant burns. You have done this before." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "I've thought about it a lot. Turns out having an escape route planned is good for mental health when you work in an illegal fighting arena." He pulled 2 respirator masks from his pack. Industrial-grade things that looked like mechanical insects. These should keep us alive in the conduits, probably. The warranty was unclear. Liz took one mask, turning it over in her hands. "You would risk this for someone you do not know." I'm really trying not to think about the philosophical implications right now, because if I do, I'll realize how monumentally stupid this is and change my mind. Ethan moved to his door, pressing his ear against it. Footsteps in the corridor, heavy boots, moving fast. "We need to move now." They slipped into the hallway during a gap in patrol patterns Ethan had memorized during months of insomnia. The maintenance access was 3 doors down, hidden behind a wall panel that most people assumed was decorative. Ethan popped it open with a bypass key he'd stolen from engineering, revealing a vertical shaft that dropped into darkness. 20 milliliter, climb down, he whispered. "Try not to fall. I'm a doctor, not a miracle worker, and the splat factor from this height is considerable." Liz went first, moving down the ladder with fluid grace despite her injuries. Ethan followed, his hands slipping on rungs, slick with condensation, and things he didn't want to identify. The shaft smelled like hot metal and ozone. The scent of a station's guts working overtime to keep thousands of people alive in the void of space. They reached the bottom and squeezed through an access hatch into the conduit system. The tunnel was barely a meter high, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through a space that was never meant for human traffic. Pipes ran along the walls, some cold enough to burn, others hot enough to blister. The air was thick and wrong, full of chemicals that made Ethan's respirator work overtime. "This is deeply undignified," Liz said, after they'd crawled for what felt like hours, but was probably 10 minutes. "I once smuggled you in a laundry cart," Ethan pointed out. Well, not yet, but I was planning to if the conduit plan failed. So really, this is the dignified option. A junction ahead, 3 tunnels branching off in different directions. Ethan checked his datapad, but the signal was weak this deep in the station. He was navigating mostly by memory and hope, neither of which were particularly reliable. Left tunnel, Liz said suddenly. How do you airflow? The left tunnel has stronger circulation. It leads to a larger space. She was already moving, not waiting for him to agree. They emerged in a cargo transfer station, a cavernous space where containers waited to be loaded onto ships. Automated systems hummed and clicked, moving boxes with mechanical precision. No people, just machines doing the work that humans had decided was beneath them. Ethan and Liz crouched behind a container marked with hazard symbols, catching their breath. Through the massive viewport, Ethan could see ships docked at the station's outer ring. Vessels of every size and configuration, all of them representing escape, if they could just reach one. There, Liz pointed at a battered freighter, its hull patchworked with repairs. That ship. The registration is fringe territories. They ask fewer questions. You know this, how I have lived many lives, she said. And something in her tone suggested that was all the explanation he'd get. Getting to the ship meant crossing open space where security cameras would spot them instantly. But Ethan noticed a cargo loader making its automated rounds, a massive machine carrying containers toward the docking tubes. I have an idea, he said. It's terrible, but all my ideas tonight have been terrible, so we're maintaining consistency. He pulled out his medical scanner, jury-rigging it to emit a false biosignature. We hide in a cargo container. I set this to broadcast our life signs from somewhere else in the station, and we ride the loader to the ship. That is genuinely terrible, Liz agreed. Thank you. I'm developing a real knack for this criminal lifestyle. They found an empty container, climbed inside, and sealed themselves in darkness. The space was cramped and smelled like whatever industrial lubricant had been stored here previously. Ethan could hear Liz breathing steadily beside him, could feel the heat radiating from her skin in the confined space. The container lurched as the loader grabbed it. Through the metal walls, Ethan heard the mechanical whine of movement, felt the sway as they were carried toward the docking tube. Any moment, security would notice. Any moment, alarms would sound. Any moment, this insane escape attempt would end with them both dead or worse. The container jolted again, harder this time. Then the unmistakable hiss and clunk of a docking clamp engaging. They were on the ship. We made it, Ethan whispered, hardly believing it. We actually made it. Not yet, Liz said. We have only survived the beginning. The freighter Asterisk, Nomad's Chance, had been in FTL for 3 days when Ethan discovered that reconstituted protein paste came in 47 flavors, all of which tasted exactly like regret. He was sitting in what the ship's captain generously called the galley, which was actually a narrow corridor with a food synthesizer that wheezed ominously every time it produced a meal. Liz sat across from him, methodically eating her own portion of beige sustenance with the focus of someone who'd learned not to waste calories. I think this one is supposed to be chicken, Ethan said, poking at the paste with his spork. Though I'm basing that entirely on the label because the flavor profile is more existential disappointment than poultry. I have eaten worse. Liz had been saying variations of that for 3 days, and Ethan was starting to suspect she actually meant it. Yeah, what's worse than food that actively makes you question your life choices? Survival rations on Kelrath for 2. They were nutritionally complete and tasted like burning plastic mixed with despair. She took another bite without changing expression. This is improvement. The captain, a grizzled woman named Tors, who'd taken Ethan's credits without blinking at his obviously fake cargo manifest, kept to herself in the cockpit. The ship ran mostly on automation anyway, carrying legitimate freight alongside whatever unofficial passengers could pay enough to be ignored. It was exactly the kind of transport Ethan had hoped to find. The kind where nobody asked questions because everyone aboard had answers they didn't want to share. Ethan's medical scanner beeped, reminding him it was time to check Liz's injuries. She'd been healing at a rate that should have been impossible. Her cracked ribs, already mostly mendite, the deep tissue damage fading faster than any human physiology could manage. He'd asked about it once. She'd changed the subject so smoothly, he hadn't realized it happened until an hour later. "Let me see your ribs," he said, pulling out the scanner. Liz lifted her borrowed shirt without protest. The bruising had faded from deep purple to yellow-green, the kind of color progression that usually took 2 weeks, compressed into 3 days. Ethan ran the scanner over her torso, watching the holographic display confirm what he already knew. "You're healing about 4 times faster than you should be," he said, which is either a genetic modification, some kind of augmentation, or your species just laughs at human medical science. All species heal at different rates. Her tone was carefully neutral, sure, and some species have pointed ears and fight like they've had formal military training, despite supposedly being arena slaves. Ethan put the scanner away. "I'm not asking you to explain. I'm just saying you're full of mysteries, and I'm curious by nature." Terrible combination. Something shifted in her expression, like she was weighing whether truth was worth the risk. She pulled her shirt back down and returned to her protein paste. They ate in silence for a while. The only sound, the hum of the ship's engines pushing them through the folded space of FTL travel. "I was a soldier," Liz said finally. "Before the arena, a good one. That training does not simply vanish because circumstances change. A soldier for who? People who believed I would not end up fighting for criminal entertainment." Her voice carried an edge now, something bitter and sharp. "I made poor choices about trusting peace negotiations. Turned out the negotiations were simply elaborate traps. Ethan wanted to push, to ask the 100 questions suddenly crowding his mind, but he recognized a conversational boundary when he saw one. Well, their loss is my gain, I guess. You killed those guards so efficiently, I didn't even have time to panic properly. I had to panic retroactively, which is much less satisfying. You did not need to help me." Liz was watching him now with those amber eyes that saw too much. "You risked everything. Why? Honestly, I'm still figuring that out." Ethan leaned back against the wall, feeling the subtle vibration of the ship through the metal. "I've spent 8 months patching up people who were going to go right back to being destroyed. Every night I'd fix someone just enough that they could suffer again tomorrow. After a while, you either accept that or you break. I was getting really close to breaking, so I was convenient. A crisis that gave you purpose. No, yes, maybe partly." Ethan ran his hands through his hair, trying to articulate something he barely understood himself. "You asked for help. Not demanded, not expected, just asked. Like you still believed people might choose to be decent, even when there was no benefit to it. I guess I wanted to prove you right." This was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "The medic before you. They did not leave for a lottery. I figured they tried to help a fighter escape. The arena owners caught them. What happened next was used as entertainment." She met his eyes. "You knew this was possible." "Yeah." Ethan's voice came out rougher than he intended, but I was already implicated the moment I disabled your collar. Might as well commit fully to the terrible life choices. The ship's intercom crackled. Captain Toe's voice came through, flat and businesslike. "We're coming up on the fringe in 2 hours. Hope you two are ready for whatever fresh disaster you're walking into." Ethan stood, collecting their empty food containers. "I should probably check our documentation again. Make sure the fake IDs are convincing enough." "Ethan," Lissa's voice stopped him at the galley entrance. "When we reach the station, you should leave. Find somewhere safe. Forget you met me. That's spectacularly stupid advice. It is practical advice. You have done enough. More than enough. Whatever comes next is not your burden." "See, the thing is," Ethan turned back to face her, I've been running for almost a year. Running from the medical board, from the corporations whose drugs I exposed, from the colleagues who called me a traitor for caring more about patients than profits. I'm really tired of running. Also, you don't even have a place to stay. And I'm pretty sure your plan is figure it out later, which is even worse than my plans. I have survived worse situations. I don't doubt it. You're clearly terrifyingly competent at survival, but maybe you don't have to survive alone this time. Ethan could feel himself committing to something he couldn't take back. Could feel the last possibility of a safe, anonymous life slipping away. He committed anyway. I'm staying at least until you have somewhere to go that isn't a cargo hold or another fighting arena. Lee stood, and in the narrow galley, she was close enough that Ethan had to look up slightly to meet her eyes. For a moment he thought she might argue, might insist with that warrior's pride that she needed no one. Instead, she reached out and gripped his shoulder, her hand warm and solid. You are either very brave or very foolish. I've been told it's possible to be both. Ethan managed something like a smile. Besides, we've already hidden in garbage chutes together. That's basically friendship by Outpost Kessler standards. The garbage chute was your idea, and I stand by it. Got us off the station, didn't it? He paused. What will you do when we reach the fringe? I mean, you can't just wander around hoping no one recognizes you. Liz released his shoulder and moved to the small viewport, staring out at the impossible colors of FTL space. I will find allies, people I can trust. Then I will go home and deal with those who sold me to the arena. Home being complicated. She didn't turn around. There are people who will be searching for me, but there are also people who will want to ensure I am never found. The ones who arranged my capture have significant power. Returning without evidence, without support, would be suicide. So you need time. I need many things. Time is one. She finally turned back to him, and her expression was different now. Softer somehow. I need someone who sees me as a person, rather than a symbol or a problem to be eliminated. You have given me that. It is a gift I did not expect. Ethan wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture the strange bond they'd formed over protein paste and shared danger. But the intercom crackled again before he could find the words. Proximity alert. Tor's voice was sharp now. Urgent. We've got 3 ships dropping out of FTL behind us. Military configuration. They're hailing us. Liz's entire body went rigid. Every muscle suddenly coiled for violence. They found me. How is that possible? We've been in FTL for 3 days. Someone very determined arranged my capture. They will be equally determined to erase the evidence. She was already moving toward the cockpit. Can this ship fight? It's a freighter. Ethan followed her, his heart suddenly racing. It's got maybe 1 defensive turret and prayers. Then we will use what we have. The cockpit was cramped. Tours hunched over controls that looked like they'd been salvaged from 3 different ships. The view screen showed 3 sleek vessels pacing them, predatory and precise. A message scrolled across the display. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. They're not inspectors, Liz said flatly. Tours glanced back at them, her expression grim. No kidding. Those are hunter-killers. Someone wants you very dead. What did you 2 do? Something stupid, Ethan said, followed by something stupider. It's been a whole thing. The Asterisk Nomad's chants shuddered as weapons fire reared across her port side. Alarm screaming in 3 different tones that all roughly translated to, "We're going to die." Torres was shouting something about shield generators that hadn't worked properly in 6 years. Her hands flying across controls while she tried to coax more speed from engines that were already giving everything they had. Ethan was strapped into the co-pilot seat, which gave him an excellent view of the 3 hunter-killers closing in like sharks that had smelled blood. Liz had wedged herself into the weapons station, a cramped alcove, barely large enough for her frame, studying the targeting display with the intensity of someone reading a tactical manual. The defensive turret has limited traverse, and the targeting computer appears to be held together with optimism. Yeah, well, optimism is all we've got. Tours jerked the ship hard to starboard, and Ethan's stomach tried to exit through his spine. These things are military grade. We're hauling frozen protein paste and illegal passengers. This is not a fair fight. Fair fights are for people with better options, Liz said. Her hands moved across the weapons controls, and the ship's single turret swiveled with a grinding sound that suggested imminent mechanical failure. She fired, and one of the hunter-killers peeled away, its shields flaring orange. Their formation is tight, overconfident. Great. They're overconfident while killing us. That's very comforting. Ethan watched the tactical display, which was helpfully showing exactly how outmatched they were with cheerful red indicators. Another impact harder this time. Something exploded in the rear cargo bay, and Tours swore in 3 languages. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they punch through the hull. Anyone got brilliant ideas? Now's the time. Ethan's mind was racing through possibilities, most of which ended with them as frozen corpses drifting through space. Then he looked at the navigation display at the swirling colors of FTL space outside, and remembered something from his undergraduate physics classes back when he'd still believed the universe made sense. The asteroid field, he said suddenly. The one we're supposed to navigate around when we drop out of FTL. What if we don't navigate around it? Tor stared at him. You want to drop out of FTL inside an asteroid field? That's suicide. So is staying in FTL with them shooting us. Ethan was pulling up the navigation data, his hands shaking. Look, they're bigger ships, less maneuverable. If we drop outright right at the field's edge and go in, maybe they can't follow us easily. Or we smash into a rock at 3 light speed and become an interesting physics demonstration. Tours countered, but her hands were already moving to the FTL controls. This is the worst idea anyone has ever had on my ship, and I once had a passenger try to pay me with live poultry. Lise fired again, hitting one of the hunter-killer square in its engine housing. It tumbled away, trailing plasma. 2 remain. Whatever you're doing, do it now. To slam the FTL disengage, and reality snapped back with a violence that made Ethan's teeth rattle. Suddenly, they were in normal space, surrounded by chunks of rock ranging from pebbles to small moons. All of them moving in complex orbital patterns that the ship's computer was frantically trying to calculate. Behind them, the 2 remaining hunter-killers dropped out of FTL, their weapons hot and tracking. Hold on to something. Tours threw the asterisk nomad's chance asterisk into a dive that ignored several laws of physics and possibly some laws of good taste. An asteroid the size of a house shot passed the viewport close enough that Ethan could see the pockmarks on its surface. Another impact, this time from debris rather than weapons fire, sent them spinning. Liz was braced in the weapons station, waiting. One of the hunter-killers followed them into the field, trying to match their maneuvers. It was faster, more powerful, but Tour had decades of experience flying garbage ships through places they had no business being. She wore between asteroids with a precision that was either masterful or insane. Coming around, Liz said calmly, and fired. The shot caught the hunter-killer as it cleared a massive chunk of iron nickel, hitting it precisely where its shields were weakest from the previous damage. The ship's reactor went critical in a flash of white light, and then there was just debris adding to the asteroid field's collection. One left, Torres gasped, pulling them through a gap between 2 tumbling rocks that left maybe a meter of clearance on either side. Where's the other one? Ethan found it on sensors hanging back at the edge of the field. It wasn't following. They're waiting. They know we have to come out eventually. Or they're calling for backup, Liz added. She'd left the weapons station and was studying the tactical display. These were not random hunters. Someone with significant resources sent them. They will send more. Tours cut the engines, letting them drift with the asteroids. Just another piece of space junk. So what now? We can't stay here forever, and we can't outrun them if they're waiting. Ethan looked at Liz, who was staring at the display with an expression he couldn't read. Finally, she spoke. I should tell you something, both of you. You have risked your lives without knowing who I am. Figured you were someone important. Tor said, you fight like special forces, and those hunter-killers don't get deployed for random arena escapes. My name is not Liz. It is Testen, Commander Testen of the Vatoran Defense Corps. She said it quietly, but the words landed like ordnance. I led the Third Fleet. 6 months ago, I was captured during what I believed was a peace negotiation. Those who arranged it sold me to the arena to ensure my silence about their corruption. They cannot allow me to return. Tours had gone very still. Even Ethan, who'd suspected Liz was someone significant, felt his understanding of the situation shift dramatically. Commander Thiston, he'd heard that name before, seen her face on news broadcasts about military victories and diplomatic missions. She was famous, legendary, and he'd smuggled her off a station in a laundry cart. Oh, Ethan said. Oh, that's why they're trying so hard to kill us. That is why they will never stop trying. Fisson met his eyes. I am grateful for what you have done, both of you. But this is where we part ways. I will take an escape pod, lead them away. You will be safe. That's the stupidest thing you've said in 4 days. And you said we should hide in a garbage chute. Ethan said, you take an escape pod. They'll just destroy it and then come after us anyway as witnesses. He's right, Torres added. Also, I'm in this now. Might as well see it through. She was pulling up star charts, her expression calculating. There's a fringe station 3 hours from here. Sanctuary station. It's neutral territory, heavily armed, and they don't extradite anyone for anything. We get you there. You'll have time to contact your people, figure out next steps. You would risk this for someone you barely know. Kid, I've been running cargo for 30 years. I know when someone's worth helping. Torres grinned suddenly, sharp and dangerous. Besides, those hunter-killers damaged my ship. That's just rude. Then looked at Ethan, something vulnerable in her expression. And you? You have already given too much. Ethan thought about the medical board that wanted his license, the corporations that wanted him silenced, the safe, anonymous life he could have had if he just kept his head down. Then he thought about Thyssen sitting in that arena medical bay asking for help because she still believed people might choose to be decent. I'm staying, he said. Someone's got to make sure you don't do anything stupidly heroic. Also, you're going to need a medic. I've seen your approach to personal safety. We all need better approaches to personal safety, Torres muttered. She fired up the engines. All right, here's what we're doing. We're going to slingshot around that big asteroid, come out the other side of the field at maximum burn and pray to whatever gods are listening that we can outrun them long enough to hit FTL again. Questions? Several, Ethan said. But I don't think answers will make this plan better. Smart man. Tor's hands tightened on the controls. Commander, I hope you're as good as your reputation, because we're going to need that turret singing. They emerged from the asteroid field like something launched from a railgun. The asterisk Nomad's chance, pushing her engines past safe limits. The remaining hunter-killer was waiting, but Torres had anticipated its position, coming out at an angle that gave Thysten a clean shot. She took it, and the hunter-killer's shields collapsed under sustained fire. It tried to turn to bring its weapons to bear, but Torres was already spinning them into an FTL vector. The hunter-killer exploded just as they jumped, the shockwave catching them at the edge of the FTL envelope. The ship groaned, something in the engine room making a sound that engines should never make. But they were away, folding space around them and leaving their pursuers in normal space. Tours let out a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob. We're alive. I can't believe we're alive. They had slumped in the weapon station, the adrenaline finally leaving her. She looked at Ethan, and her expression was something between gratitude and disbelief. If we survive this, I suppose I will need that place to stay you mentioned. Yeah, Ethan said, feeling the reality of what they just done crash over him. Yeah, I guess you will. 3 hours later, Sanctuary Station appeared on their screens. a massive construct of metal and determination spinning in the void. It was ugly, cobbled together from a dozen different architectural styles. But it was safety. It was time. It was a chance for Thyssen to contact her people, to build her case, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. As they docked, Thyssen turned to Ethan one final time. "I do not know how to repay what you have done. You asked for help when you needed it most. You trusted me to be better than the place we were in." Ethan smiled, tired, but genuine. "That's payment enough. Everything else we'll figure out together." And somehow impossibly, they